I love that video. So, to get started here, everything has a start. So the question is, when did I first get the bug to get into performance? Hopefully this thing works.
And that was a tough car.
I'm going back again. Okay. This is a car, this guy used to live about, when I was 15 years old, this guy used to live about, I guess, 4 or 5 houses away. And it was a warm spring evening. I had gotten in the bed, and all of a sudden I started hearing all this engine revving and tire noise. So naturally I get out of bed, put my clothes on, and shoot down the street. There he is doing hole shots in the driveway, supposedly getting ready for this weekend in Motor City Dragway. Anyhow, all I got to tell you is I stood there and watched this guy doing burnouts. I don't know about you guys, but when you're 15 years old, the smell, the sound, just everything about it, it's just intoxicating. And that's when I got the bug. So from then on, I wanted to be with cars, performance, do my own thing, and that's what started it all for me. You guys may have similar stories, I don't know. This is not working, not to get this.
John, I can do it if you don't.
Okay, give me the next slide. No, that's way too far advanced. You gotta go backward a few slides. There it is, next one. Yeah, this one. So in 1972, I started with Ford Motor Company, and my first assignment, believe it or not, one of my responsibilities was I was in the Autolite racing team, and I used to go around with A.J. Foy. And I'm telling you guys, as a young man, I got to meet all the legends, including Foy, of course, the Unsers, Dick Simon, Mario Andretti, and got to meet them all. And because we used to go there during the week in prep for the race, we got to have dinner with all these guys and talk to all these guys, and they were all great people. The problem is, in 1973, and I know quite a few guys were here, 73, we had the energy crisis, and Ford Motor Company decided to pull the plug on all performance in racing. So we entered into the dark ages of performance, as everybody remembers. The early 70s were awful. Now, the next slide, I just added it this morning for your edification, John. Because as bad as the 70s were for performance, I personally was gratified because somebody at Ford was doing something. And as you can see on top here, the 77 Cobra, I saw that on Michigan Avenue in front of World Headquarters, went to the dealer, bought one. And I can tell you that is me at my own driveway with the car.
I'm vindicated.
I know John's been a big Mustang 2 fan, right?
What age is it?
I don't think I ever told you I had one.
No.
Yeah, I
That's
wouldn't.
when I parked my King Cobra in your parking spot.
I didn't want you to feel good.
Oh.
But you know what? I'll tell you, things even got better, because I'll tell you, when the 79 came and the Fox body, now we were at Ford, of course, and we knew what was coming. When the Fox, I couldn't wait to get my hands on a Fox body Cobra. There was a young engineer that worked with me in the office at the time. He had a 78 Corvette. So we had a big shootout. That is the finish line at Milan. And you can see where the Mustang just edged him out. That was a 78 Corvette. Now, part of the problem was he was a shitty driver. But the results stand, right? If you lose at the starting line, the results stand. Next slide. So what happened is, it took me 15 years, right, to work my way over to car product development. I was at Triple E, which is Poli Building. Last name was Poli, but I was Triple E when I was there. It was the engine engineering building. And after 15 years, I finally worked my way to car product development, which was Building 3 across the street. And that's where the action was. That's where I wanted to be. Unfortunately, the job they gave me was cafe planning manager. You guys know what cafe is? Knowing my history, can you imagine how I felt? Anyhow, so I tried to work with the program managers, trying to improve fuel economy, one thing and the other. And my vice president, Max Jarosik, pulls me aside at a meeting. And vice presidents in those days, these are old school vice presidents, they were feared. Absolutely feared. If any of you guys, the old guys know, they were absolutely feared. He takes me inside and says, "You're not doing your job." I said, "Max, what do you mean I'm not doing my job?" He said, "I have not gotten one complaint from anybody about you." I'm thinking to myself, geez, that's what it takes? So I started being a little more aggressive with the teams to get more fuel economy out of them, right? And next thing you know, my secretary, Helen Johnson, wonderful lady, in those days we used to communicate with buck slips. She says, "John, I don't even know if I should show you this." I mean, the hate mail. These were threats from program managers about what they were going to do to me. And the first one came, didn't think anything of it, the second one, the third one. Finally, I started a hate mail board. And it filled up, trust me. And one day I went back to Jarosik, who was my VP, and I says, "Max, I gotta be doing my job. I got a board full of hate mail." He says, "Keep it up." All right. So anyhow, you may have heard that sometimes to get to heaven, you gotta go through a little hell, right? Well, cafe planning was my hell. I'm sitting there one day, and this gentleman up here, his name is Ken Dabrowski, he walks into my office. He was the executive director for small cars at Ford at the time. He walks into my office, sits down. Now I knew Ken from powertrain days. He says, "Coletti, I want you to come work for me." And I'm thinking to myself, geez, anything to get out of here. I mean, anything. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And he explains to me that he needed a design manager for these three cars: the old Escort, the Tempo, and the old Fox Mustang. Now the reason notice the beautiful sunset picture? These were what we call sunset programs at the time. Coletti, your job is to be a caretaker and take them to the grave. I'm thinking to myself, sounds pretty bad, right? But still better in cafe planning. So I took the job. Give me the next slide. No, the one before this one. Go back one.
It is 6. It is 7.
Go back one before Ken. No, go the other way then. All right, well, let's start here and pick it up. So what happens is Ken one day takes me over. Him and I were good friends. He takes me over to the design studio, and he shows me this car on top here. And at the time, on the back quarter panel, I had big GT written on it. And he says to me, "Coletti, what do you think?" I says, "I don't know, Ken." He says, "That's a new Mustang." I looked at that and I said, "Ken, they may be a lot of things, but a Mustang it ain't." Just based on visual. I mean, look at the low hood and everything else. It just didn't have it wasn't a Mustang, at least in my mind. He said, "All right." So he would have meetings with this gentleman, because the Ford at the time had decided they were going to can the car, right? So we get this new executive marketing vice president. His name is Alex Trotman, Scotsman. He comes over, couldn't have been there a week. I think Bob Tasca got to him, Bob Tasca Sr., because he was a very vocal Ford dealer that didn't like the idea of dropping a Mustang. Anyhow, Trotman gets to Dabrowski, takes him aside, and he says, "We got to do something. Can't let this car go." And here's an Englishman, a Scotsman, realizes that you can't drop the Mustang. It's the car's a legend. You just can't drop it. So the next thing you know, it was an August day. I'm in my office, and Ken calls me in. And he says, "Coletti, I just met with Trotman. He wants a fresh eyes approach to the Mustang." Well, what does that mean, Ken? He says he needs somebody to figure out how to make the car survive. You want to take on the task? And I remember I was, geez, imagine being offered the opportunity to to work on a Legend. I was quiet, which is unusual for me. And I must have paused a little bit longer than normal. Well, he says, well, do you want the job or not? I'd be honored to do it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I fail? I mean, the car's already on the death, you know, it's scheduled for death anyhow. I can't do any worse than that. So he said, all right. So what I did is I assembled a team, and this is the original Skunkworks team here, and we would meet every Tuesday night at my office after 5 o'clock. And we'd work till, 8, 9 o'clock at night, trying to figure out, is there a way to pull this thing off? Because the car that the Ford wanted, they couldn't afford in those days, and the car they could afford, they didn't want, which was the Probe. Next slide. Now, I show this picture here because a couple of years later, when we got our first prototype, the team got disbanded after we got the approval to go forward. But I wanted to bring the team, the original team members back together. This is the first mechanical prototype of the new SM95. So, good looking group. That was a good bunch to work with, and they really did a nice job. Next slide. Now, this is the slide I was looking for before, but it was my mistake. So anyhow, I remember I was told to not do anything on the sunset cars, just let them die. They were scheduled for the graveyard. Well, if you know me, that ain't gonna happen. I could not be a caretaker. Now on top here, 91, I used to have Mustang convertibles. Does anybody remember the high top stack when you used to put the car down? This is prior to 91. Look at those things. I mean, it was hideous, right? So I got together with CNC, a couple of the engineers there, and I said, why in the hell does it have to be that high? Why can't I go down like every other car? And one of the engineers, young guy, says, oh, we can fix that. I said, well, let's do it. So they came up with this, and next year we did the lower top stack, 2.5 inch. Nobody said I couldn't do it. It was kind of cool because I just took it on my initiative and nobody said yes or no, or even thank you, but we did it. The other thing was, remember in 1990, all you could do was get a 15-inch wheel, right? And I wanted to put bigger brakes on it. Well, the only way you're going to get bigger brakes on a car is if you got bigger wheels, right? So we released that wheel. Again, it was kind of funny. I was kind of learning my way as to how much authority I actually had. And nobody said anything, so I continued to go forward. So we made these two changes. Next. Does anybody remember the Tempo? Now that was a real dog of a car, right? Oh, Jesus, it was an awful car. But it was my baby. Best-selling car in Canada, good. Yeah, well, may have sold car, but it was still a dog. So anyhow, we got together, the group my engineers got together, and he said, why don't we put a V6 in it? I said, a V6? You think it'll fit? Well, we'll get it in there. I said, all right. So I just said, let's go do it. Now here's an example. You remember the old saying that if you build it, they will come?
No.
Okay, you've heard that from Field of Dreams, right? Well, in this case, here's a situation. We built it, we didn't tell anybody, and nobody came. I mean, marketing never bought into this. Here's an example of, we actually put it into production. I don't even know how many units we sold. It was a zippy little car. But there's another example of I couldn't keep my fingers off of it, even though I was told to let it die, right? Because I think it died a year or two later. Next slide. Now, one of my planners, Joe Laura, comes to me and he says, Coletti, I want to do a feature car. We need some action on Mustang. And remember, we were told to let it lay, but I said, all right, what do you propose, Joe? So in 1992, he said, I can do a vibrant red feature car, a spring edition. I said, let's do it. So here's a planner, not even an engineer. He works the system, and he gets the plan to release this thing. All 2,000 went. All right, next slide. In 93, this is kind of in chronological order. In 93, we knew that the new Mustang was coming, and all of a sudden the world said, how are we going to tell the world there's a new Mustang coming? So we said, okay, why don't we do a concept vehicle? And I said, I'd like to do a two-seater. If you're a performance person in the industry, you always want to do a two-seat sports car. At least that's what I thought. So we got together with the design center and we ended up doing the Mach 3. Now the important thing about the Mach 3 is it gave people an idea of where, at least what I was thinking, where the world should go. Can you see it has a 4.6 supercharged engine? There was no modular engine in Mustang at the time, and nobody in the world was using superchargers on V8s. You guys can go check the books, nobody was doing that. But I wanted to do that. And the other thing is, buried underneath there was an idea that I had worked on with one of our engineers called the supercooler. Not just a regular intercooler, this was a supercooler. So we put that in the Mach 3, and we showed it to management, and then I get, Bob Rui calls me into his office, and he was an intimidating fellow. I mean, his staff was just, geez, they were afraid of him. So I go say, Bob, what's up? He says, Coletti, I know you're going to show them the new Mach 3 at the Detroit Auto Show. What are you doing for LA? I said, nothing. Think about it. I got one car. The two shows in those days were on top of each other. I can't have it in both places at once. Well, how about doing a second car? I said, well, who the hell's going to pay for it? Because, budgets are a problem in big companies. He said, on the way out, talk to such and such, and they'll transfer the budget over to you. That's the kind of support we got from our management. And here, Joe Laura was the program manager, and there's the two Mach 3s. It was, in retrospect, how gratifying that is to have that kind of management support. Next slide.
John, wasn't there a green one?
No, they painted, one burned up and the other one got painted green by GMAs, which, don't ask me what I think of that. So still in 1993, Joe Laura comes to me and he says, John, we got to do another feature car. So the white car here is the white monochromatic. You guys may remember this. That was Joe's idea. Me, on the other hand, I said, Joe, we got to do something a little more aggressive. Now, at the time, there was no Ford Motor Company car with yellow paint. Vehicle operations would not paint yellow. So I got together with their management and the plant manager and the paint people and everything else, and we finally settled on, we'll run a pilot of this yellow. The other thing I wanted to do was, I hated argent wheels. I love chrome wheels. And putting chrome on aluminum was tough, but Superior Wheels told me, yeah, we can do that. So that's how we got to this car. That's Joe's idea, this was ours. We ended up selling 2,000 of both of them, no problem. Next. This is all while we were supposed to take them in the sunset. Now we're in 1994, the SN95. Now I thought Bud McGaldy was going to be here tonight, that's why I put this picture in there. That's a picture of Bud and I at the design center, the Mustang design studio. And by the way, I was going to tell him to his face, Bud was one of the finest gentlemen in the company. Just a pleasure to work with. He's a nice guy. Would you guys agree that? Oh, Bud, what a great guy. When you say a true gentleman in every sense of the word. And by the way, here's his entire design team. I put that in there. Again, thinking he was going to be here tonight. And you can see Emily's in there too. Next. So we launched the SN95, and to our surprise, this was the first car program I ever did. We ended up with the Motor Trend Car of the Year. In retrospect, it's a bigger accomplishment now. At the time, I didn't even think about it. The gravitas of the thing, I didn't appreciate at the time. In retrospect, this was very cool. Next. In '94, we also had a couple other projects we did. Bart McPherson was the program manager on the Indy Pace car. You guys remember that one? Yeah. Now we had to build 5 special ones for Indy to actually run. And the reason we had to build 5 special ones is they had to be able to get out of the way of the cars as they were coming around the final, the first lap. And the Mustang in those days could not meet the acceleration requirements. The other thing is, I think John knows this, I've always been, if you ask me what the best Mustang, my favorite Mustang was, the 69 Boss 429, no question. I could never afford a Boss 429. However, in this job, I said, you know what? We need to do something special for the 30th anniversary of Charlotte when we introduced the new Mustang. So that we took one of our old prototypes, okay, and I had Roush build a 604 Boss to stick in it. Here we are in the other picture. We're showing Jay Lano because Jay's always talking about how big his engines are in his cars. I said, well, beat this one. This car here, did anybody go to the 30th anniversary in Charlotte? Yeah, you were there, Mark. Larry Shinoda, he rode with us down there. And it was his stripes, this is the Bosch Shinoda stripes. I told him I wanted to use his stripes, but I wasn't going to put his name on there. He said, but John, it's my design. I said, you want it on the car or not? I said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. At the show, you can use this as a backdrop to where you're going to be signing autographs. I think the lineup to get Larry Shinoda autographs with this car in the background had to be a quarter-mile long. Jeez, it was unbelievable. He was happy. Next. Now that we got the Mustang launched, the SN95, we still had a problem. It was called Camaro. The Mustang Camaro battle was still raging. And we weren't beating them. Dario Orlando of Steeda Mustangs, I happened to have a meeting with him, and he said, John, we're having a tough time on the IMSA circuit with the Camaros. The 5-liter ain't big enough, our fuel tank's too small, all the reasons we couldn't win. So my guys put together this 6.1 liter CJR model. And this car really ran. We actually had a new Camaro that we beat the shit out of, just obliterated it. But I told the guys, I said, the problem with this guy is this, trying to do a 6.1 liter engine, getting those engine changes, it's going to take us another 12 to 14, maybe 18 months before we can actually do the car. So what we did instead was we went through the catalog, the Ford Performance catalog, and looked at all the 5.8 parts we could put together. Next slide. So in 95, this is what we had our eye on. So now we got this list, this bill of materials, and we said, with all these hot rod parts that we camshafts and all this stuff, cylinder heads. So I went over to Windsor Engine Plant because we were still building 5.8s at the time over there. And the plant manager's name was Cy Ducharme. Now you gotta understand, none of this was authorized. There was no program approval, nobody went to anybody to get, I just was doing it because I wanted to do it. So I told Cy, I said, Cy, we're trying to do this Cobra R, 300 units, and we need 300 engines, and here's the bill of materials. He looks at it, and he was a good guy. He says, yeah, we can do that. He says, when do you want them? I said, how about next week? And he says, you're crazy. And I said, that may be true, but I still would like the engines next week. Can you do it? So he made a deal with me. He said, I'll tell you what, I got a warehouse 2 blocks over from the plant. He said, if by Wednesday you can have all the parts, and I mean everything, every bolt, every gasket, everything in that plant, in that storage facility, I'll build the engines for you. Now, Steve Anderson was my program manager on this. Remember Steve, right? So Wednesday came along, and Steve and I got in the car and we went over to the facility to see all the parts. So we show up there, and there's a guard at the door. What can I do for you guys? Well, we're here to see the parts. There aren't any parts here. I said, what do you mean there's no parts here? There was supposed to be he said the plant came over this morning and took them all over to the engine plant. Oh, good, all right, so over to the engine plant. So we go there, and the engine plants, and this was an old style engine plant. They had all these cribs, with the cage doors on them and everything else. And just to show you how unofficial this program was, on 8.5, this kind of stuff, all it said in pen was race car parts. And they were all locked bins. That Friday, Cy built 250 of these things. He calls me up and he says, Friday afternoon, he says, get him out of here. Because he didn't want his management to see him. Because, we're not only we built them, they had to be secured. So I had the Roush team go over with semis and pull them all over to the Roush facility back in Allen Park. So now I got the engines, right? So I need to build cars. And Lou Calloway, who I knew very well, he was a plant manager at Dearborn. There was no way Lou was going to do anything like this. So, but his assistant plant manager, the gentleman's name was Wheeler Stanley. Good guy. I go explain to him the situation. He says, he says, I understand. He said, but it ain't going to happen with Calloway here. He says, but you know, Calloway's going to Puerto Rico for a week. I said, when is that? He says, I think it's next week or the week after. Can we do it? Let's do it. Now, these were all misbuilds, you understand? We physically had to misbuild the cars. So, next slide. There they are, all 250 at the plant. Now, Wheeler, Friday night, Wheeler calls me up. Coletti, you know, Calloway's coming back on Monday. He had guards on. He had 2 guards overseeing this inventory. He says, you got to get these things out of here. You can't let Calloway see this. So I called Mascotech, the old Lynch Road. They were now housed at the old Lynch Road facility on Mount Elliott. So they brought over their trucks and they moved them all over the weekend. So when Calloway got back, nothing had happened unusual. Then we went ahead and got with SBT. Remember, that's the first time we said, how are we going to sell these 250 cars, right? And we used the fax machine to sort it out. Whoever got his order in, got through the fax machine. We let the fax machine figure it out. I think about 10 and a half hours later, they were all sold. About 2 weeks after that, after all the cars are gone, now this is ancient history to me now, right? I come back from a meeting in my office, and Sue Meyer says, John, there's 9 or 10 people in the conference room, they want to talk to you. I said, all right. So I go in there, and it's the automotive emissions office, the legal staff, the FMVSS people, corporate compliance and policy, they're all there. And they went on and read me chapter and verse on all the violations that I had committed. The first one they started with, this is a gas guzzler, you understand? And Ford had a strict C9 policy, no gas guzzlers. So I listened to all their complaints, right? After they were, you know how you go through that pregnant pause, they were done? I said to him, I says, well, I guess all I can say is I'm sorry. The guy says, you're sorry? He turns around, puts his hands on his hips like this. He's sorry. Then he looks back at me. Let's get out of here. Never heard another word. I thought I was going to get fired for sure. And again, I didn't get a call from anybody saying you did wrong, did right, thank you, or anything. But the world was happy, right, John? All right. Now you got to understand at that point, what am I learning? I can do whatever the hell I want. I mean, that's what the system is teaching me, right? Next slide. So the next year, they said they wanted a special concept car. So Fred Goodnow, he got a XJ220 chassis, I believe, from England. And we built this GT90 off of it. And I wanted to make the most awesome supercar around. At the time, 720 horse, 220 miles an hour was going to be Top Gun, right? The only problem is, you know, the V12 engine is a big engine, it's a long engine. By the way, I give credit again. I went over, where am I going to get a V12? You know, they're not laying around, right? So I went over to Jim Gallardi, he was the chief of advanced engineering. And I said, Jim, you got anything around here I can use that's got 800 horsepower? He says, no, but I do have, at the time this was a naturally aspirated product. He said, no, I do have a couple of V12s. If you're interested, we were going to do it for Lincoln, but they decided they didn't want it. I says, I'll take one. So he gave me the engine. I sent it over to Roush. I said, put 4 turbos on it. Now you might say, why 4 turbos, right? And anybody knows turbochargers. First off, you want to keep them small for response time, right? And you want to keep them closely coupled to the cylinders so you don't have a long exhaust, again, for turbo lag. So Roush did a nice job of plumbing up 4 turbos. Now, this was all the guys at vehicle design, they were livid because it created a really long ass end on the car, you notice? If, proportionally, you would say that car is a little bit too long on the ass end. Well, it's got to house the V12. So all these vice presidents assembled at the design center. I mean, there was at least 6 of them. And Telenac was there. Coletti, why can't you use a turbo V6? Because a V6 would make a nicer design car, right? I says, I'm not doing a V6, guys. You know, we're going to do an awesome V12. We're going to have the ultimate supercar. End of the story. Now, if you guys want somebody else to do it, fine, go ahead. But we're going to do a V12. You know what the vice presidents did? They got up and walked out. And there's the car. What are they teaching me at this point? Next slide. So in 1996, apparently they thought this guy's wacko enough, and they wanted to do Ford Global, global effort. Coletti, you're in charge of Europe too. What do you mean I'm in charge of Europe? I actually, the other day I found it. I wrote a 3-page letter to Ray Shafford, my executive director at the time, telling him all the reasons this ain't gonna work. So I'm on the plane over to Europe. You know, he must have either not read it or disagreed with my comments, I guess. I don't know. And I got to tell you this part of it. I'm on the plane to Europe, and I'm thinking, well, you know what? At least with the Brits, we speak the same language. I should be able to get along with them, right? The Germans, it's going to be tough because I don't speak German, and I hope somebody over there speaks English, right? Well, I found out that the ones with the bug up their ass having an American manager were the Brits, and the Germans embraced me. But we ended up working it out, and here's the whole team at Brands Hatch, so it all worked out. But just again, sometimes you have these preconceived notions about what's going to work and what's not going to work. It was ass backwards. Next slide. Now, at one of our Brands Hatch events, they brought out, this is the original 1966 press car. It's a 289 GT40. You talk about, imagine, do you guys recognize the backdrop? If you've seen the movie Grand Prix with James Garner, anybody see Grand Prix? Well, that's Brands Hatch. That's the Formula One track at England. And I got to drive the original GT40 on that track, and I said, if I get a chance, I'm doing a GT. No question about it, if I get a chance. But that was such a far-fetched dream, I didn't even think. But I just wanted you guys to know that this is what happened. You drive that car on that track, you're stunned. Next. In 97, they said, Coletti, we need another concept car. I said, all right. So we pulled out one of our old prototypes. And Al Sudan did this has got this push-pull system, IRS system in the back. I was going to put a picture in, but I failed to do so. But anyhow, Al Sudan walks into my office with a working wood model that he built over the weekend at his house. And I said, let's stick it in the car. So this, if you ever see like the Motor Trend magazine on the Super Stallion with Jim Scott, you'll see the push-pull rod system in the back with to support the IRS. By the way, I see they're doing it on the new, almost the exact system on this new car, this new Mustang you're doing. Yeah, 30-some years later, right? Now, the other thing about this car I want to show you is, I was thinking supercharger again. This time 5.4 4-valve. 5.4s didn't have 4 valves at Ford, but this one did. And I also made it a flex fuel car. And you might say, well, why'd you do that? Well, flex fuel in those days was considered clean air. This car actually led the clean air parade from Central Park to the Jacob Javits Center in New York. I mean, this car sounded awesome. You know what it was like seeing this car at the head of all these electrics and bicycle cars they had? But this was a clean air car. I remember, who was the editor of the Cleveland Plains dealer, the automotive editor? Chip. Anyhow, he says to me, Coletti, I understand the technology, but why the wild paint scheme? I said, I had to get your attention, didn't I? And guess, does anybody know where that wild paint scheme came from? Larry Shinoda. So the boss, what did the boss and the stallion share? Larry Shinoda, graphics. Next. Now, not everything we did worked. So we had a cemetery. Actually, it was called a graveyard. And it was behind my door. You remember, John?
Oh, yeah. That's stuff.
We tried a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff just didn't pan out. Now, the first one on top here, you see that Thunderbird? I drove that, what a great car. I drove that car from Las Vegas to Junction City in the 97 Hot Rod Power Tour. I must have done 130, 140 miles all the way. What a great, that car would eat up the grades like nobody's business. But the problem was Thunderbird was going away, so what's the point of making an SVT version, right? Next to it is, on the right there, is a V8 powered Ranger. When we were thinking about what truck do we want to do, we said, well, you know, we could either, what hasn't somebody done already? We were looking for what people haven't done. So it was the Ranger, or it would ended up being the Lightning. So this one lost, but you know what? It was a smile maker. And then I think the guys ended up putting a blower on it and turned it into the Lightning Bolt, and it's in somebody's museum right now. I don't know. All right. Paul Newman used to come visit us just before the Grand Prix, because the Newman Haas team would sponsor one of the cars. So he would always come, and we'd let him drive our cars at the test tracks. So he says, you know what you guys need? You guys need to do a sleeper station wagon. He says, you know, I got a Volvo station wagon, but it just doesn't have the punch. He says, you guys need to do a sleeper. So again, Steve Anderson and the guys, the white car there, that's got a show engine in it. And we referred to it as Gumby. But in the end, you know what? It just didn't have the punch. It didn't have enough punch, at least not for me, and it put a few of the other guys, so it got canned. Over here in the middle, it was a ZX2. We called it a CT120 Coupe. Al Aslapis and his people put together this turbo package. The problem with that, it was a nice car. The only problem is, durability-wise, we kept blowing motors. And after you blow a certain number of motors, you kind of feel like maybe this dog don't hunt, right? So that one got canned. Now over in Europe, I was also doing programs. I was treating those guys the same way I treated my guys here. This is the ST220 Mondeo. Great car. Bob Brown led the charge on this. The marketing guys said it'll never sell. So it didn't see the light of day. It was a nice car, but it didn't see the light of day because of marketing. And then they had a thing over there called the Ka, K-A. It's like a really small B car, they call it. And it came with a 40 horsepower motor, okay? And the guy says, can we do something? So I remember on one trip, they put a 60 horsepower motor in it. Like this had a 1.4, I think they put a 1.6. Next trip, they put a 1. Because I used to go every month, I'd go to Europe for 6.5 years. Finally, we got to a 2-liter, and I said, it just didn't have it, so we canned that one too. Anyhow, there was a couple other programs I won't bore you with, but these are 6 that stand out that were in the cemetery. Next. Now, in '97, I figured it was time to get Carroll Shelby back into the Ford fold. You know, Carroll was, I'll tell you guys, he was persona non grata at Ford. You couldn't mention the name of Ford Motor Company. I mean, people had a lot of bad blood with Carroll. So I went to his place in Gardena, his Goodyear's shop there, and the lady told me, Mr. Shelby can only give you a half hour at this time. He has a hard stop at 1:30. I said, all right, I'll take the half hour. I just want to meet the guy, you know. So we started gabbing and talking. And at 6 o'clock that night, I left. I mean, he showed me the whole place. He was really gracious, and it was just a lot of great stories and a lot of stuff buried in the building. A year later, I went back with Steve Saline, because I was visiting Steve on some other business, and we went to visit Carroll again. You can see he looks a lot younger there. This was 1998. Then a couple of years after that, I was able to get, help me out, John, our PR guy in LA, John Kleinert. John Kleinert says to me, John, would you present Mr. Shelby with a Special Achievement Award at Barry Jackson? I said, I'd love to. So this is around 99 or so. So we're starting to ease him back into the Ford system. Now this is the big one here, guys, right here. I didn't think this would ever happen. You can see they're not embracing each other here. But at least they were in the same picture. This is Utzel Ford and Carol. But I knew everything was good when Bill Ford brought Carol on stage to introduce the Daisy, which was the concept version of his Roadster. So this is the progression. Starting in '97, and by 2001, 2002, he was back in the Ford family, and then of course we signed the deal to do the licensing deal to build Shelby's. Next. So in '98, Bob Brown came back over to the U.S. He was in Europe, came back to the U.S., and he had done a concept car called the Profile, and he said, "John, we need an Executive Express." So he went ahead and led the charge on this, and I said, "Fine, let's do it." And so the Contour was done. It was moderately successful, I think, right? Next. Of course, in 1999, we introduced the Lightning. And the marketing manager at the time thought that the blower noise was too loud. I told him I didn't give a shit. And the reason I didn't give a shit is, does anybody remember, did you guys love it when in the old days, 60s, when the 4-barrel would kick in and you'd hear the back tube? Was that a cool sound? Well, on this thing, once the blower kicked in, you knew it. Okay? And here's my marketing manager telling me, well, we got to do something about that sound. Anyhow, this turned out to be wildly successful. They were all gone. I got one just like this one here, this red one. And I think what did we do? 4,000 units. And he was so concerned that they wouldn't sell that he put the price at $24,900 or something. I mean, it was nothing. They sold out immediately. And the next year, I said, well, why don't we raise the price a couple thousand? They sold out again. What does that tell you, Anyhow, next slide. So 2000 comes along, and we get the bug up our butt to do a new Cobra R. You guys, this was one of our internal meetings. It's time to do a Cobra R. So we did this 5.4. You guys remember this one? Okay. And this was done by Elise Borla. We got all these aftermarket companies involved in this, everybody, and she put this poster together, or this advertising piece. And the reason I got this over here, the two guys I want to give special credit to for making SVT and what we did even possible, our guardian angels. They ran air cover for us. Neil Ressler is on your left, and Bob Rui is on the right. I'm having lunch with Neil in a week or so. Bob Rui, unfortunately, has passed away. But these guys, I got to tell you, when this car was done, there was no marketing manager. This is the transition between Tim Boyd and Scarpello. So somebody had to set the price on the car, right? You need a marketing manager to do it. You can't have an engineer do that. So I was really hesitant because just to break even, we weren't making any money. This had to be the most expensive manifold ever conceived on the planet. You guys ever see this manifold that's on this car? And it had to be at $54,000. Can you imagine? I said to myself, a Mustang has never gone over $50,000 base price. We're going to have a tough time. So I get Bob Rui. I tell Neil Ressler I'm really concerned. So he says, well, let's have a meeting with Rui. So we take the car over to world headquarters. Rui comes down. I take him through the car. He's sitting in the car. It even had a wood grain shifter on it, if you guys remember. And I said, Bob, there's a problem. He said, he's sitting in the car and he was looking up at me. He says, what's the problem? I said, with all the equipment on this car, we're going to have to price it at $54,000 just to break even. If you want, we can take stuff off the car to bring the price down. He looks forward, looks back up at me, and he says, who told you to take anything off this car? All right. And that's what happened. 300 of those units went out, no problem. And today I'm seeing what the price, they've kind of gone into hibernation, it seems like. Because now I'm only starting to see them, but they're over 140, 150 grand. I can find them. Next. Okay, now we had this unfinished business with GM. The ZL1, John Moss at GM was touting the fact he had the fastest car in Detroit, and I said, bullshit. This was the cover of Car and Driver 2000. We had the shootout and the Mustang beat him. End of story. John doesn't even talk about this anymore. I know he's just issued a new book about how and a ZL1's featured prominently on the cover, but what he's not telling you, he's got his ass kicked. Next. So, in 2001, I got, in addition to the SVT in Europe and everything else, they made me director of the GT program. And what you have here is, these are the key people that made this happen. Obviously, next to me in blue is Bill Ford. He wanted something special. Now, when we talked about doing something special for the centennial, Ford was going to be 100 years old in 2003. He says, what can you guys do that's special? And we talked about all kinds of cars. Some people wanted to do a Corvette fighter, some wanted to do a Viper fighter, somebody wanted... I said, look, there's only one car that's genuinely Ford, right? And you remember the earlier picture I showed you about the GT? So I said, we need to do a GT40, a modern day GT40. So here's the men that I want to credit to making it happen. Gordon Boyd here in the blue shirt, he's with Mayflower, he built the aluminum bodies. Ken Way from Lear, he did the interiors on the car. Next to me is Jack Roush, he did the powertrain, and Steve Saline assembled them all at our Troy facility. Next. In 2001, Al Sudam came to me and he said, we can upgrade the Lightning. I said, do it. So there's a few more horses. But then Bob Rui calls me and he says, Coletti, you got to do something with those lights. I've always hated the lights on the F-150. He wanted crystalline lights. I walked out of his office and what the hell is crystalline? So you guys know what 2001 looks like. The lights and the power of the change. Next. So 2002 comes along and we launched the two sister cars here. The SBT Focus, and in Europe, the ST170 Focus. Okay? Now, this doesn't mean anything to anybody here. Maybe you don't care because the Ford management didn't care. But this was truly a global program. In other words, one engine out of Chihuahua supported both the assembly plants for the US built cars in Hermosillo and the European cars built in Saarlouis. Ford had not done that before, and I don't think they've done it since. The two groups say you can't do it. This team did it. Next. So 2003 comes along, because around 2001, Rui takes me inside and do you guys remember having the 99 Cobra, the horsepower issue? Okay. So they tried to fix it, and it didn't get fixed. So Rui calls me in 2001, he says, Coletti, you now have the Cobra. Takes it away from Team Mustang, gives it to me. And I get my guys together, and we figured, holy shit, what do we, you know. And he wanted the car in 2003, because there was no 2002 Cobra. So we built a naturally aspirated version, because Carpella was really concerned about the price, right? Remember? And this book here that was written by Frank Moriarty kind of outlines what happened with the naturally aspirated version. It was a real dog. It was such a bad car. Andy Slanker, who did the SBT Focus, we were down in Badwater in Death Valley, and we had CBs at the time. I said, Andy, get up here with that Focus. And we did a second gear roll. And you know the Focus pulled away from my Cobra. And I said, there'll be no goddamn way in hell I'm building this car. And we went to Badwater, and everybody knew of it. Nobody wanted to be near me. I was pissed. I said, this car says, well, we got to build it. I said, why are you building that car? It's a dog. As a matter of fact, I went into the shop there. It was like a gas station. And they had a 6-pack of alcohol, you know, the dog food. I bought it and put it in the back seat of the car. I said, this ain't no Cobra. But anyhow, if you read the book here, which I had nothing, I did not authorize this book, trust me. Because if I'd authorized the book, it wouldn't have had that title. If I'd authorized the book, it had said, Lovable Fuzzball. Anyhow, this book kind of outlines what the team went through and everything else, but that's what created the 2003 Terminator. Now, the other thing is, when we put the blower on there, this was an awesome car, we knew it. There was a lot of issues to get it to production. I won't bore you with the details. But we wanted to really stick it to Camaro. We wanted to end the production Camaro Mustang war. You know what those bastards did in 2002? They canceled the Camaro. There was no Camaro in 2003. Here I'm ready to drop a nuclear bomb on them. And they walk away from the battlefield. And then Scarpello, he surprised the hell out of me. You see this picture on the bottom? We were introducing the car at the Chicago Auto Show. And he does a burnout. This is indoors from underneath the bleachers to the stage. He didn't tell me about it, he just did it. I said, holy shit. I mean, he engulfed the whole, he did a great job, it was a burnout. He should have told somebody he was going to do it. Next. Now, at the 2003 Centennial, we needed to have a car there, obviously a GT, and they had to look like production cars, and the guys wanted to do one. And I said, hell, if we can do one, we got to do three. And they said, why three? Red, white, and blue. So the three cars went across the stage. Here, pictured with me here is Dan Gurney, myself, Chris Theodore, my boss. On the other side is Nick Sheila. He was president of the company at the time. You can see Carol Shelby was there. And Jackie Stewart, you know, the Formula One champion. Next. Here's job one at the plant in Troy. Chris Theodore, he's over the moon. I look at this picture and I'm thinking he was really happy. Next. And then Bill Ford wanted to have a picture with the team. So here's the management team that did the GT40. We did this at the design studio with vehicle number one. Next. So 2004 was coming along and the Lightning was, the 221, the PN96 was going to be replaced by the 221. So we put together this concept vehicle. We showed it at Detroit. Remember that super cooler that I had in the original Mach 3? Well, this truck was going to use it. It was up in the corner. This program is called Tomcat. Okay. Next. And we were also getting ready for the next Cobra. Okay. This one was called Condor. Remember, Ellen Collins was the program manager on this one. But 1994 marked a key decision point for me. I'm thinking to myself, we had a successful launch of the GT. What more can you do than what you've done? Maybe time to exit. So I decided to retire, okay? And these programs got shelved for some reason. I don't know what happened. But I left, and these programs never made it. Now I understand that a lot of the technology in this one rolled over into the Shelby models that follow. Next. So I retired, and Ford and Jay Leno threw a party for me out at his place in January. All my kids and family were there except Michael, who's here tonight. Why didn't you go, Mike? I mean, he was the only one in the family that wasn't there. Next slide, please. And we wrapped it up with this picture, which I love. Here's myself, Carol Shelby, Jay, and Gurney. It was a great night. We had a lot of good stories. And all I can tell you is I'm going to end it on a video. But I got to tell you, this was one hell of a ride I had for these years that I was at SVT. Oh, shit. Really? So next slide, and I'm going to end it on a video, and then I'll take your questions.
Let's get ready to rumble! Hey, John. Someone new in town. Yeah. You gonna go after him?
Hey, listen, Professor. If he can't find me, then he ain't even worth racing, right?